To Joy Meets World. I'm your host, Joy Yugi, and on this podcast, I'm sharing about my adventures traveling across the country, hiking and seeing our national parks with my dog, Quincy, who you might hear in the background. So where we left off was in Custer, South Dakota at Wind Cave National Park. And I traveled just a short distance, about an hour and a half and 94 miles to Wall, South Dakota, which is pretty much a little north, but mostly east of Custer. Wall is 15 minutes from the park entrance to Badlands National Park, and a point on a loop road that essentially goes through the park with a lot of scenic overlooks and hikes that go off of the loop road. So a really convenient place to stay. It's also home to the famous Wall Drug Store, which home makes its own donuts, still offers 5-cent coffee. And the story of Wall Drug is pretty fascinating. They pretty much almost went out of business in the 20s or 30s. And then they came up with this ingenious advertising strategy to offer free ice-cold water to travelers who were coming to and from the Badlands to Mount Rushmore, which is actually closer to Custer. And that gave them a business boom, and they just kept expanding and expanding. And it's almost like a mini mall. Right now, it's probably like 2 blocks of the downtown in Wall. Definitely more of a tourist trap than a drugstore or a cafe. They have a little restaurant there. The food is pretty good. But then the rest of it is essentially a giant souvenir shop. So it's fun to visit. I wouldn't make a dedicated visit to Wall Drug Store. And my Airbnb, of course, was just within walking distance of downtown, and then, 15 minutes from the park entrance. So love that. Wall is not named for a person. It is actually named for Badlands National Park. There is a wall of the Badlands, of these pinnacles, that's 200 feet high, that kind of starts the park at one end and that the scenic drive follows. So to explain a little bit about what the Badlands looks like and what it is and how it was formed, which I didn't know before I visited and really learned about it. All of North and South Dakota is covered in prairie. And parts of it, there are the Black Hills, which, uplifted these granite mountains, these granite hills. But then in other parts of the prairie a long time ago, it used to be covered in water. And so essentially underneath all the prairie are it's just sandstone. Essentially sand over the years accumulated. When it was a sea, the sea went away, the sand compounded and turned into sandstone, and the prairie came on top of it. Well, sandstone it's a very soft form of sandstone, and so the ice, the water, the snow, the rain, the wind that came over the years started eroding away the sandstone to the point where it's just flat, kind of rolling prairie, and then all of a sudden down, like it's just these rock formation canyons and pinnacles and spires, and it's just really a case study for erosion. So it's hard to explain it, and there are different, you can see in the places where it's eroded into these canyons, the different kind of strata and rock layers, which make different colors. There's like a yellow, there's like a pinkish, a blue. So it's really neat to look at all the different strata. And it's called the Badlands because the Native Americans who first lived in the area, they could not use it for anything. You can't walk through it, right? Like you can't traverse it. It's so frustrating. There's no clear path. It's very dangerous, right? Like very steep. No game lives there. people can't live there. So the Native Americans called it Badlands. And then the early settlers, pioneers, trappers who were in the region who came also had the same kind of premonition as the Native Americans. I think it was the French who first came there, and they named it the land that is bad, or the Badlands. And so that's the name that's stuck ever since. The governor of South Dakota, who really pushed for it to become a national park and was the main reason it became a national park, actually didn't want to call it the Badlands for PR reasons, right? Like, who's going to be like, yes, let's take a trip to the Badlands? Like, it's not very good for PR. So he tried really hard to rename it, but it stuck, the name stuck, and it hasn't really deterred any tourists or visitors. It still works, and they've done a great job. It actually became a national park in 1978. It was a national monument since 1929, that got that national park status in 78. On the day I went, it was warm and breezy, so very early May. I took the first trail that I hiked is called the Door Trail. You kind of follow this boardwalk around these giant mounds in the Badlands, and then it's a hike through the Badlands, and you're just following these like poles, numbered poles sticking up out of the ground. And so you have to like kind of look in the distance and see where the next pole is, and then figure out how to get there. And there were 10, and then at the end of it, there was this beautiful canyon overlook that you saw, and then you kind of had to find your way back. It was so much fun. It was so much fun trying to look for those poles and kind of figure out your own way through the Badlands. This is probably one of my top hikes that I've done on this trip so far. I loved it. And then there was another trail, the Window Trail, which was probably an intermediate hike. So it started off kind of flat and moderate, and then it just, all of a sudden, there was a ladder that just went up a cliff, and that was part of the trail. So you climbed up this ladder, and then the rest of the trail was along the side of a canyon. Like at one point you were rock climbing because the trail was too steep. It was like way too close to the side of the canyon, so they made you climb up this boulder and like around the trail. So you definitely had to get hands-on, couldn't have been afraid of heights. Now the canyon was not super tall, it's not like the Grand Canyon or anything, but it was steep. The whole hike was probably 2 miles, so not bad all around, and the view at the end point was amazing. I know why it's called the window view, because it just opens up at the end and you just look out over the entire White River Valley Basin and see like all of the Badlands and then all of the prairie. It was gorgeous and amazing. Such a great hike. I'm so glad I did it. And then I drove the Badlands Loop Road back to Wall and stopped out at a few scenic overlooks to see the Badlands. And on the drive, I saw animals. I saw bighorn sheep, which were just chilling in the sun on the side of the road. It was so, so cool to see them. Saw buffalo and, of course, prairie dogs, which are my new favorite. They were all over the place. They're very hard to catch on camera. They're literally all over the place, but the minute you step out of your car or start walking towards them, they dive into their holes. So you really can't get a video or a picture of them, but I'm going to keep trying. I love the prairie. I love the wide open spaces. You can just see for miles. It's so beautiful. It's so simple, but so beautiful. It's probably one of the my favorite like geological features that I've seen so far, and I am looking forward to telling you more about it when I go to Theodore Roosevelt National Park in North Dakota next. But until then, that is it for Badlands National Park. Definitely worth the trip. Plan to go. It's awesome. you'll love it. It's one of my favorite parks so far. If you want to see pictures or, videos from it, just follow me on Instagram at JoyYugi. You can do that. If you want to watch this podcast, you can follow me on YouTube. I'd love it if you subscribe to my podcast and then rate and review it. That helps other people who are kind of interested in the national parks learn about them in case they want to go. That would really help. But that's it for this episode, and I wish you happy travels wherever life is taking you.